I'll start. My name's Alice, and I'm just going into my third year of PhD at Cambridge. I'm at the Faculty of Education, and I'm at Homerton College. I've never actually lived in college. All my experience is living out of college, but that's probably to do with my age and coming here as a master's student rather than undergrad. So yeah, who wants to go next?
So I'm James. I'm just finished the third year of 6 years of medicine at Downing College. I'm just about to move out of college, so I've lived in college for the past 3 years. I sing in the college choir. That's basically my only other activity apart from my degree. So yeah, I can answer any questions on sort of college life from that angle.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom. I just finished my third year, so I've actually left Cambridge now. But I just finished my third year studying English, and I was at Gonville Keys College. Yeah.
Cool, amazing. So I guess probably the best way if you just unmute yourself, ask any questions about Cambridge, or put them in the chat if you'd rather do that. Yeah, they can be course related, college related, anything. Is the chat on? Okay. Julia says, the controversial question, which is better, Oxford or Cambridge, and why? Go on, someone start that one off. Thank you, Julia.
Yeah, I can start it off. I think a lot of it just comes down to vibes and preference, but I think one of the things that helped me choose between them, because I do still think they are very similar, like as institutions and as cities, they are quite similar. Cambridge is much smaller, which I did prefer. Oxford, I think, tends to be like, if people think that it's bigger. But for me, choosing the course was the biggest factor in terms of choosing between them, because for English, it starts from medieval onwards, and at Oxford, for the English course, it starts from Old English, so it starts about 200 years earlier or something like that. And I knew I didn't want to do Old English. Medieval was probably far enough for me, so I thought that was probably part of the reason why I chose it. And then again, I'd visited Cambridge and I really loved it, and I saw some of the colleges, so I thought I'll probably want to apply here. So that was kind of my reasoning behind it.
I think my main reason for choosing Cambridge rather than Oxford was the course. Similarly, I think again that the methods of teaching at both are probably very similar. It's always mostly lectures with some lab work if you do science, and then supervision or tutorial style teaching is a lot of it with supervisors who mark essays. But I just found that the overall course structure for medicine was a lot better at Cambridge, and some people found the exact opposite. So some of my friends applied to Oxford instead because they preferred the way that they do things for medicine. So yeah, it does come down to what personal preference to that extent, what style of teaching you like. But to be honest, the styles of teaching are quite similar overall at both. So I mean, we get on quite well. I think, to be honest, when you actually get to Cambridge, it's mostly kind of a joke, like we respect and appreciate the people at Oxford, even if they did make a questionable choice.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, I'm like not a big city person, so just the fact that Cambridge is a bit smaller, and I just like the sort of feeling of the town or city a bit more, which is like, a fair enough reason to choose, I think. Yeah, and course, those are two big ones, I guess. And I think you just said that, James, but Nia's just asked, does Cambridge and Oxford teaching style differ from other universities? So I would probably say that Cambridge and Oxford are very similar. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yes, they do differ to other universities, although not all universities. That would be like a bit of generalization to say no one teaches like Oxford or Cambridge. But the small group tutorials is definitely a unique, or supervision, sorry, not tutorials, small group supervisions is definitely a unique thing about Cambridge. So you'll be supervised by a academic, in really small groups. So I think they're like, how many people per group? Like 2 or 3? 1, 2?
Yeah, at most 4, but that's for undergraduate medicine.
Okay,
Never more than 4 for me.
Yeah, so you'll have like obviously your normal lectures, but then you'll have these small supervisions with only 2 or 3. And I actually supervise this year, so I don't know much about them as being a supervisee, but I do supervise on them. So yeah. Ooh, does someone want to say about the pros and cons of different Cambridge colleges?
Yeah, so there's partly a question of what the accommodation is going to be like. So obviously older colleges, lots of the central accommodation is going to be quite old. Often it's actually quite good. It's got good facilities, but then there's also a case of its age, and particularly there's a question of accessibility. So in the newer colleges, more of the accommodation will be accessible by wheelchair or by lift, and other things like that. Whereas in some of the older colleges, more of the accommodation is hard to access. So I think that's a big thing if that's applies to you. There's also just a case of, you know, how close you are to your departments. Like there are just some colleges that are generally further away from things like Girton. I mean, to some extent Homerton even, and I guess it is quite far out from the centre.
Yeah, I think, yeah, totally agree with what James is saying. It just tends to be in terms of accommodation can vary a little bit. If you want a central college or a far out college, you know, it's a lot of preference. Some colleges are bigger, some colleges have tend to have like, the one thing I will say that can be sometimes useful is some colleges do have some grants and things in place. And that is quite a nice thing to look out for when you're applying, because it can help a bit whilst you're studying. If you know that there's like a specific grant or scholarship that you might be eligible for, or that you can apply for, that can be quite nice. Like James was saying, he's part of the college choir. Some college choirs are better than others. So like obviously if that is a big factor for you, then obviously that you can look into that. But obviously at the same time, you can still attend that choir even if you're not at that college, because I joined Lucy Cav Choir because it was a bit more casual than my college's choir. But yeah, and in terms of accommodation and like the resources, I really like my college because it had a really cool library, and it was right in the center. So like each college does have like a different factors. Some colleges have swimming pools, stuff like that. So it's just nice to have a look at some of the resources they can offer and provide for you, because each college does vary a little bit, but is a nice like hub for you.
Yeah, I would like just to add on that too, that some colleges, like I feel like some colleges might align better with your values, and like not sort of, you know, like I think maybe 20 years ago this would have been a very different conversation, but there are probably still some more traditional colleges, and then some colleges are a bit modern and sort of value like have maybe a little bit more liberal values, or yeah, the opposite. So I guess it's just finding one that sort of fits with your vibe, I guess. I don't know much about the admissions process. What would you say about, were the tests and interviews highly stressful?
Yeah, James, you go first. I'll follow up.
Okay. I mean, the way that I've always thought that the way that the admissions processes are set up is to sort of test whether you will survive Cambridge. So you start off by like, if your academic results are good, then you'll probably be at the standard that the lectures won't be overly challenging. Then you have the you know, the in-person you know, what's called admissions, you know, things, and those are basically like supervisions. You know, interviews are basically supervisions when you go to Oxbridge interviews. So they're testing, can you be taught, how do you think about things? And so therefore the admissions tests you do, written papers, they just tend to be how papers will be when you actually get onto the course. So I think if you find them stressful, then they're sort of the worst case scenario. They just make them harder than they would be. So it's sort of the supervision from hell. Yeah, so I mean, some people find the interviews, for example, quite interesting or quite fun in that sense, but there is always this pressure. So I think I did find the interviews a bit stressful because of that. It's just because there's so much, you know, dependent on it, really.
Yeah, definitely agree. The interviews are really stressful, but you just kind of have to treat them as like opportunities to chat to experts in their fields, and the opportunity to kind of take your work a little bit further. So I had to do an entrance exam, and I think most courses tend to do an entrance exam for it. But you've also got your academic grades. They read your personal statement. They interview you. So there are a lot of different factors that all contribute to it. So if you've just got 1 week, when that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to like strike you off. It just means they might look at different elements of it. I remember when I was doing my interviews, I did 2 interviews, and the first was horrific. I hated it. It was so bad. I came out and I wanted to cry. I called my mum. I was like, this was awful. And then the second one went a lot better. So you just never know with the interviews. You just have to kind of do your best, try and think in your feet, because that's all they're really trying to do, is try and figure out how you think and how you can present yourself and make your points. See how you like adapt under pressure and adapt to new ideas and things like that. So it's really hard, but I just think the best advice is to try to enjoy it, and just try and treat it like you're chatting to your teacher or something like that. Because if you relax into it, you'll just enjoy it so much more. But yeah, it feels like a long process once you're in it, but you have to do it, and you get a lot out of it. It's a really good experience in the end.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's probably like a really easy thing to say, but because they are stressful, like there's no getting away with it, getting away from it. But I would definitely like use your interview, if you get one, as a chance to like sort of like twist the psychology and say it's an interview for Cambridge as much as it is an interview for you. So you're the one like testing whether actually, do you like it here? You know, sort of bring some of that power back to you, and like say, actually, do you know what I mean? As much as they're testing me and I really want to get in, I want to use this as a chance to see if like I actually enjoy this, or I actually can see myself doing this. Might be easier said than done, because it will be stressful, but sort of bring some of that power back into your own head about it all, and try to enjoy it as much as you can, I guess. Because as Tom says, yeah, if you enjoy it, you'll perform better. Is there any more questions?
I've actually got a question for the time being. I wanted to ask if any of you have ever suffered any form of sort of imposter syndrome at Cambridge, especially with like the prestige of the university. It's something I've dealt with a bit, and my university is nowhere near as prestigious as yours. So I just wanted to hear about a bit about your experiences with it.
Oh my gosh, 100%, always and forever. Like, you know, I'm now like hopefully next year gonna pass my Viva and become a doctor in my chosen field, and I still feel like I know nothing, and I'm still waiting for the moment I get an email to say, Alice, it was all a mistake. You know, you got in by accident. We don't actually believe in the research you're creating. And like, I still wait for that email, honestly, and I don't think I'll ever get over it. But I think part of dealing with imposter syndrome is knowing that actually everyone feels the same, and it doesn't matter what level of education you are, you'll still feel it. And that's okay. And I really am suspicious of people who say they don't feel it. I always think, you know, if someone says no, not at all, I'm here, and I have my right to be here, and that's fine, I'm suspicious of them. So yeah, 100% feel it all the time. Not that that's always helpful. I have my ways of dealing with it, and you need to remind yourself that it's not a mistake that you're there, and you know, you do have that ability, but you will feel it forever and always, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with Alice. I think it's just one of those things where you do kind of, everyone gets it though. So that's the only thing that does make it a bit easier, is everyone goes through that same experience of you start off and you just think, oh my God, what am I doing here? Because you look at sometimes some colleges have like quite famous alumni, and it is really daunting when your DOSs or your director of studies, sorry, or your supervisors kind of, I remember I wrote an essay one week, and then the supervisor wrote in the comment, oh, see my book for more on this. And I was like, oh God, like I chose the exact like specialty of their field, and it is really scary. But I don't know, at the same time, you just have to kind of take a step back and think, wow, I'm here, I might as well do my best and try not to let it get to me, I think is probably the best advice. Everyone does have a bit of imposter syndrome. Like everyone's had, like lots of people have it before uni even, like that's just a thing of life. And I think that's just a thing in academia. And you just have to kind of like Alice said, like how you have coping mechanisms with it. You have to remind yourself that you have earned your place, and just chat to people about it, because lots of people go through that same experience. So that's kind of, yeah, that's kind of it. It's present within academia, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with what's been said. It's sort of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, because you're going into academic fields, you know what you don't know, and I feel that that's a big contributor sometimes to feeling this imposter syndrome. So that's partly why everyone feels it. I think it tends to sort of taper off a little bit sometimes. I mean, in my experience, it was sort of like it really peaked when I joined, because I'm thinking, oh goodness, like everything's made of sandstone, you know. And then it's like I've sort of accepted it a bit more, that, you know, there's a combination of things that have brought me to Cambridge, you know, partly what I've done, partly all the support I've had, partly a bit of luck, you know, in the mix, and you come to accept it in a bit as time goes on.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I just sort of thought, I'm kind of negative saying, oh, you'll have it forever and always. I don't mean that in a completely negative way. To give you one example of like a way that I cope with that is, you know, I write a list of all my successes. And when on those days where I feel like I'm having no success and I'm not getting any writing done, my thoughts are rubbish, I look at that list and think, okay, Alice, this week has been bad. This month has been bad, but last month you did something really cool and you're proud of that for you. So I always would definitely encourage you to write a list of the things that are going well, so then when you're having a bad day you can come back and look at them and think, okay, yeah, it's all good. What are the other questions? I've heard stories about Cambridge interview questions being quite crazy. Do you recall a question that has really stuck with you for a good or bad reason? I'll start that one off by saying my brother interviewed for Cambridge and he was asked something like, how many trees are there in the UK? Or something. It was like, this was like 10 years, maybe 15 years ago now, but he was asked how many trees are there in the UK? And obviously the academic wasn't looking for him to come up with a number, but he was trying to tease out of my brother how he's going to get to a number. So he's like, you know, he doesn't even know the distance, like the length of the UK. So he's like, oh, how can I work out the distance? So he knows to get from Swansea to North Wales, where my gran lives, it takes 4 hours. So he's like trying to work out, okay, well, if I'm going at 60 miles per hour the whole way, I can work out the distance. And then once I know the distance, I'm going to estimate the average tree per distance, whatever. You can tell I'm not into maths or anything like that. So he's able to verbalize his reasoning and able to explain how he's going to get to a random number. And even if that number is absolutely wrong, he still managed to get there and explain how he's got there. Do you guys have any stories like that?
Yes, one of the interviews, which actually I've been told later did actually go quite well, was my chemistry teacher, God bless her, put in that I enjoyed organic chemistry, and so the interviewer said, well, I hear, you know, that you like organic chemistry, and then we spent the next 10 minutes doing a mechanism. And it sort of explained how this like series of enzymes worked, and it was really fascinating. But you know, it was kind of stressful in the moment, but it did actually it almost like proved to myself like actually that did go okay, you know. So that was quite almost affirming for me. I don't know.
Yeah, much the same. I think not quite as wild as the tree question, but I think in my first one, I remember there was a line in my personal statement that was possibly ambiguous or something. And I remember the interviewer just picked it out and went, well, I disagree. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And then it basically was just me kind of defending my point a little bit, seeing the both sides of it, but saying why I wrote it and why I stood back behind those kind of ideas and things. So it wasn't really to scare, it did scare me, but it wasn't really to scare me. It was more to kind of look at my reasoning and try and think about why I wrote that and why possibly it could be something else, or maybe why I decided to kind of follow through with that idea. So yeah, like a little bit scary, but there's reasoning behind what they're doing. They're not trying to terrify you, they are trying to get the best out of you.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Yeah. I've heard of that tree one a few times though, so maybe practice your answer for the tree one. If you could give any advice to your past self about the application process, what would you tell yourself? I think just like back yourself. Like if you've got to the point where you're thinking about applying, go with it with like everything you've got. Yeah, and just what have you got to lose, you know?
I'd probably say all of that preparation that you're doing for the entrance exam, yeah, that's good, because it's going to make it less stressful on the day. When you know the format, when you know the kinds of questions that come up, when you've got all of the things, all your ducks in a row, then you'll be prepared. And even if it doesn't go well, at least you've tried, at least you've prepared well. And that sort of stands you in good stead then even for other things like A-levels, you know, you're well prepared for things.
Yeah, quite similar to Alice. I think I would kind of advise myself not to worry so much. I think I am a bit of a worrier. So it's just, there's no need of, like, obviously it is very stressful. Everyone understands that. And it is very scary, but just try to do your best. And like James was saying, prepare as much as you can. Like, one of the best things I did was just give my personal statement to my mum, and she would just kind of ask me questions about it, or just ask me to explain random points that she didn't get. And so then I'd kind of word it in a different way and maybe back it up. And that was just quite good practice for the interview. Not that my interview looked at my personal statement that much, but it's just good practice to see how you like react like on your feet. So yeah, I think just keep, yeah, like a bit of a mix of what Alice and James are saying, of back yourself a bit, but also just do your best, practice a bit. Yeah.
And then how did you choose your course? What made you interested in that subject? I'm the worst example for this, but actually an example that might give you hope that not all is lost if you really want to get into Cambridge and you don't. I went to Bath Spa for my undergrad, which is like not a Russell Group university, you know, like not people who apply to Cambridge don't apply to Bath Spa. Like they're very different universities with different structures, and so I was not interested in sixth form in studying at all, and studied education because I loved working with children. Little did I know that that education course would actually teach me I do like studying and I do like theory, hence coming to Cambridge to do my master's and now my PhD. So again, just remind yourself that actually if it doesn't happen right now for you, it might happen again another day, and there'll always be a reason to happen if it happens later on. So don't worry about that at all. What about you, Bertu?
I mean, I chose medicine when I was about 15, so you know, it wasn't something that I'd had for my entire life. No doctors in the family, no nurses even. So you know, it was last minute, but it was just based on experience with clinicians, you know, and then based on that, you know, what particular clinical role did I want? So I thought I'll go for doctor because of certain sort of academic things which I quite liked about it. Yeah, and in terms of choosing the course at Cambridge, it was just I quite like the structure of the course, the fact they still use dissection for teaching, the fact that there's this preclinical clinical structure which would allow me to intercalate, so I could do a BA in biological and biomedical sciences. So that really appealed to me. That was the main thing.
Mine's a bit random. So I was kind of torn between medicine and English for a long time. So my A levels were in sciences and English. So it did kind of get up to like a week, 2 weeks before the personal statement, which I wouldn't really recommend. A bit stressful, but I really like the two. I like the idea of the two, and I really love the sciences at A level as well as English. I just really clicked with English at A level. Like I enjoyed that at GCSE, but I really loved it at A level, and I thought I actually really want to take this a bit of a step further. and I had some really great teachers that kind of encouraged me, so I thought I might give this a go actually. So started looking, just reading a bit broader than maybe my A-level course did in year 12 and 13, specifically over the summer of year 12. Actually liked doing research outside of my A-levels for that specific degree, so I thought I'd apply for English, and so I did. And yeah, I really enjoyed the 3 years. So yeah.
Perfect. The next one is, what downsides, I'm just aware of the time, but just what downsides of life studying at Cambridge would you warn newcomers about? I think the only thing I would say is, like, you know, it is really intense, but then terms are 8 weeks long. So that intensity, you're sort of rewarded at the end of term. And also, you know, the way that I've coped with that in the past is, you know, having those things outside of your academic life, or like, you know, if it's a sport, a choir, whatever it is, you know, don't ever let that go, because it's really important for your mental health, and that it helps with that intensity, even though it feels at the time maybe you don't want to give up any precious hours. It really is worth giving up 1 or 2 precious hours a week to deal with that intensity.
One thing which really surprised me when I arrived was sort of how much I missed actually like being in a place with mountains. Like, it's incredibly flat in Cambridge, and there are no Welsh people. I've just looked at the statistics. Like it's 1.9% of undergraduate admissions are from people from Wales. I think partly there's just a lot of people from London, a lot of people from the southeast, because it's geographically closer. And I feel that you're going to have to find communities of people who are, you know, not just the Welsh people who are the 2% who there. So it's a bit of a culture shock sometimes when people then, you know, expect you to be very Welsh. But yeah, it's just a bit of a culture shock to some extent, being in a place with, you know, hard water and, you know, different shops. Yeah, it's yeah.
Downsides, I think, is partially the workload is really intense. Like, it is something that everyone's there for reasons because they do really like and are really passionate for the subject, but it does get really intense. And like I was saying, you do get the benefit of 8-week terms, but it basically means that you work hard, you play really hard as well. It's not all work, but you just work and play really hard, and then you get some time off. So that is like pros and cons to that kind of system. I really liked it, but it is really draining. And then I guess the downside, I probably would go the imposter syndrome. Probably that would probably be one of mine. I think a lot of people do struggle with it, but you know, I did love Cambridge, so there are ways around it. But those are probably my 2.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And Julia's asking about, how does the application process for a master's and PhD to Cambridge work? That is a whole other world, and I admire you, Julia, for thinking about it now. But I would say that, like, I don't know what your experience is, both of you, but there's probably quite a lot of support for like progression. So once you're here, I think that those sort of steps become a little bit clearer, and you meet people who are doing masters and you meet people who are doing PhDs, so those steps become a little bit less complicated. But you're welcome to ask me more about that at another time, if that's okay, because I think that's 4 o'clock. Are we finishing at 4, just to check?
Yeah, I mean, there's no time limit because the next session is my pre-recorded lecture for medicine, and there'll probably pre-recorded lectures for all of the subjects. So
okay, cool. Perfect. If there's anything else anyone wants to ask away, otherwise we'll. Yeah, well, let's call it a day, shall we? But obviously you can just drop us a message with any more questions you think of, and we'll be here. Yeah, so perfect. Thanks so much for all the questions, everybody. Thank you.